We could definitely do that one. We're definitely going to do it. We're doing all three of these.
Oh, okay.
But we're just going to figure out
whether today or tomorrow.
Which one you do first, which one we do second, which one we wait for tomorrow. Like I said, the consulting advice one might.
Why don't we start with that, because it might spark some.
Especially you guys
spark some stuff for the second one.
Especially you guys are like in the middle of like thinking about your brand, so like you're at like second base with it. I think it's a good one.
Well, we're running to first.
As a part of producing this show, we get lots of random emails. And most of the time, it's people that want recommendations for visiting Kentucky. And if you're going to come, just make sure you go and check out our Yelp list for all the recommendations of places to dine and do things while you're in Louisville. But every once in a while, we get questions where people need our advice. And this could be from brands or individuals out there just wanting to break into the bourbon industry. So I thought, how great would it be to have an episode where we give free consultation advice? And in this episode, we give our advice on sourcing, blending, and social media strategies. So stay tuned as you get to hear the Bourbon Pursuit team answer your questions about the whiskey business. So enjoy this week's episode. And now here's Fred Minnick with Above the Char.
I'm Fred Minnick, and this is Above the Char. This week's idea comes from Christian Madsen, who writes on fredminnick.com. Has anyone ever experimented with stainless steel barrels and adding staves to get the approximate same surface area of contact with the juice? Christian, that's a great question, and I will just kind of throw it back at you. First of all, yes, people have done that. There have been a lot of staves introduced in the stainless steel process. They're not always introduced into the actual barrel. But I think this is something that's very, very dangerous. You're looking at opening the door for a lot of gimmicks, a lot of things that bourbon distillers have been trying to protect against for 150 years. And that is people, making false claims and doing shenanigans with wood chips. A lot of this like stave finishing, it's kind of not bourbon. Not kind of not bourbon. It's not bourbon. It's a whiskey, but it's dangerous in the sense that it starts tooling around a little bit with what can be done with the name bourbon on the label. Remember, bourbon is a federally protected term, and once something else enters the liquid outside of the barrel, and once it leaves the barrel, it's no longer bourbon. And so, like, there's this whole thing: bourbon finished with X stave, bourbon finished in X barrel. And while that may be true, those finishes are still under classifications of called distilled spirit specialty. The bigger issue at hand is the definitions and the labeling and all that versus the creation of the whiskey. Now, the federal government is working on getting those where they have their own definition. But, to answer your question, yes, people are doing it. I'm a fan of experimentation and a fan of really putting a lot of effort into these stave finishes. I just want to keep the name bourbon off of the label and just call it a whiskey on the front label. You can say it's formerly a bourbon finished in XXX on the back label. So that's the purist in me, so just wanted to cover that. But, that stuff is happening. You're going to start seeing more of it, but I don't think it's because of a barrel shortage. I think it's because people are trying to find cost-effective ways to get interesting flavors in your whiskey bottle. And that's going to do it for this week's Above the Char. Hey, if you want to be like Christian Madsen, hit me up on fredminnick.com. That's fredminnick.com. Hit the contact button. Let me know your question, and if I like it, I'll read it on the air. Until next week, cheers.
From their bar to yours, Chad and Sarah of the popular YouTube channel It's Bourbon Night bring you their favorite at-home old-fashioned mix with the new Elemental Elixir's Golden Hour Syrup. It's a custom-made syrup with notes of bold black tea, warm spices, and orange zest. All you need is your favorite whiskey and ice. No bitters needed. One bottle makes 16 drinks, so that's only $1 a cocktail before you add your own whiskey. They can also be enjoyed in other cocktails or spirits, mocktails, coffee, tea, and anything you can think of. It's crafted locally in Lexington, Kentucky, and you can get your bottle now at whiskeyambitions.com. Do you ever pour yourself a bourbon, swirl it around, and then start struggling to come up with tasting notes? And perhaps you're also looking for a good Father's Day gift idea. Well, you can now solve both with a kit from Knows Your Bourbon. And unlike other nosing kits on the market, Knows Your Bourbon kits feature real ingredients for the most authentic aromas. You can smell real Tahitian vanilla bean instead of some synthetic aroma that's just made from chemicals. So head on over to knowsyourbourbon.com and enter code BP10 for 10% off your order. Ed Bly and Rising Tide Spirits are back again with a new release of Old Stubborn Bourbon. And this release of Old Stubborn is a premium hand marriage of 10, 11, and 12-year cask strength, barely filtered pot still bourbon. It comes in at a staggering 123.8 proof. And the flavoring grain for this one, which the last one was wheated, but this time it's now rye. Rich, sweet, and bold with a long finish that's sure to be another eye-opener. You can order online at Sealbox or thebourbonconcierge.com, and you can even purchase in person at Revival Vintage Spirits, and even now with very few select stores in Kentucky. You can get it now while you can, but be sure to do it because it's not going to last long.
Play Whiskey Wednesday Round 11, the memory game. Until June 26, each week you can win one of our 12 incredible grand prizes. Select 2 doors at checkout. And if they match on drawing night, you'll win that bottle. Not a match? No worries. You still score a Weller 12-year. Every $5 ticket gives you 5 chances to win, including 4 weekly bonus prizes. Get your tickets now at give270.org. Charitable Gaming License ORG 0002703.
Always find what you love at Total Wine & More. With so many great bottles to choose from at the lowest price, it's easy to find your favorite Cabernet or a new single-barrel bourbon to try with some help from one of their friendly guides. And with every bottle comes the confidence of knowing you just found something amazing. With the lowest prices for over 30 years, find what you love and love what you find only at Total Wine & More. Curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly and be 21. Welcome, everybody. We're back with another episode of Bourbon Pursuit, the official podcast of bourbon. And this one, we looked to you. But first off, I want to say we have the whole gang here today. So we got Ryan.
Hello, guys. Hello.
And Fred back.
What up?
And we're going to have a good conversation because I looked to you as an audience. I put that on Instagram and I said, we're going to give free consultation advice. And this was something that I looked at as a way because we see there's all kinds of people out there that we've had them on the show before. They're brand builders. They do consultation as their living. And I said, we've seen this happen before where we've gotten emails that said, I had this whole business strategy. Then I listened to something you all said and I adapted it or I changed it. I pivoted. I did something because of what they learned on the podcast. And I said, that's a great idea. Let's go ahead and take some questions from the people that are starting brands. Maybe they want to start brands, end consumers out there of what they think. And we'll just kind of go and see where this takes us.
Yeah.
And we'll just give some free consulting advice of what it looks like.
I think it'd be fun because, even though we are tater podcasters that don't know what we're doing, we have interviewed and met with some of the sharpest, greatest minds in the bourbon industry. And we've learned what hasn't worked, what works, what people should be thinking. And so I'm glad to do a brain dump this morning of everything I've learned from all the great guests we've had.
And you all too also have a brand.
And we have a brand. We're going through
brand.
it too. Yep.
One thing that I have I've seen history of things play out of what works well and what doesn't. And what's interesting today is that you can't apply business principles. If you started a brand in 1995, you were essentially applying business principles from 1950. You're applying very similar business principles. Today, it's a whole new world, and there's so many new opportunities for someone to come out
and challenges
with a brand. Yeah, definitely some challenges. But what we have today, if you're starting a brand that you did not have in 1995, you have an eager fan base of whiskey drinkers ready to buy the next bottle.
You have an eager fan base, but you also have this idea of people think it's a big gold rush right now. Let's get in, let's buy stuff, let's figure it out. We'll get there, but it's not as easy as we've said before. You're just buying some barrels and putting in a bottle. There's a huge process behind it, and there's ways that you need to figure out. Well, how do we take care of this from a marketing standpoint? How do you take care of distribution and all that sort of stuff? So
financial road mapping, planning, forecasting,
all that sort of thing.
Not getting paid by people, collections.
There's the highs and the lows. But let's go ahead and do our first question. So this one comes from Phil Brandon of Rocktown Distillery. And he says, I've been distilling for 12 years and I've won major awards for my bourbon and sell all that we make. However, should I buy more stills to expand production or source new make from Kentucky distilleries?
Well, that's a great question. I would ask myself, so obviously, what are my goals? Am I, I think you said he's in Philadelphia?
He's Arkansas.
Arkansas. Gosh,
Yeah.
why did I think Philadelphia? How did I hear that? But
Yeah, Rocktown has been around for a while.
okay. Yeah, I mean, if you're winning your yard and you're content with that and you're happy and that your customers are happy, I would continue just doing what you do. But if your goal is to kind of get outside of, that Arkansas area and push beyond your audience you have now, sourcing is going to be a great option for you because you're going to have product that's going to be, maybe it's not ready of age yet, but it's going to be faster than waiting on yourself to get a still made and waiting for that whole process to get going. That you're probably 2 to 3 years for that to happen. And so I would just look at my goals and say, how content am I with my current audience? Do I really want to expand this outside of that? And who am I trying to appeal to? And Kentucky bourbon's always going to appeal to bourbon drinkers, but also too, if you're have a great product and it's unique, the Arkansas product would be great as well. So I don't know that it's hard to know without knowing his end goal there.
So, what's interesting here about this is we have a question here from an A-list craft distiller. Like this is an A-list craft distiller. He has bottled and bond bourbon out there. He has super fans. He has people who carries his torch in our community and like social media circles. And, I hear this all the time from craft distillers, and it pains them. It pains them to see a source bottle outsell theirs. And there is an incredible hurt from distillers like Phil when they see that. And I think what that question is alluding to, it's not about scale. It's not about creating something unique. He is just trying to get his whiskey on the same playing field as just pick a random MGP or Barton source product that's on the shelf selling for $60. He's trying to get that same level. And obviously there's a lot that goes in there. And I'll push back to Phil and say, I don't think you should ever doubt yourself as a distiller. I've tasted a lot of your stuff over the years. Have I reviewed everything favorably? Absolutely not. But I've not reviewed anybody's, 100% favorably. But you have won numerous competitions and blind tastings. Some of my colleagues have given you incredibly high scores. And I think too, you have a group of consumers in Arkansas who want to support you. And I would say grow that base. Do whatever you can to super serve Arkansas consumers and stop worrying about the source product. And so if you have the money, if you have the ability to upgrade your equipment to increase capacity, I'm putting my vote for that because I think the world needs a lot more Arkansas bourbon and more states like Arkansas with lead distillers competing at the highest levels than we need another contract distilled Kentucky product.
Well,
That's me as a fan.
Fred knew the brand. I did not know the brand, so it's hard for me to understand the goals, but I totally agree with you, Fred. It's like Seth Godin's a great marketing genius, and he always says have this win the most smallest viable audience and have super fans, that, and just cater to them and then just keep catering to them. And that's, be true to yourself. You don't have to be on the same level as all the bigger brands,
And who did the best job of that I've ever seen? New Riff. As soon as they came out, before they had a drop of bourbon on the market, they created what was the Ranger Club?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They created that before anything, and they were basically selling futures. And I was like, this was 2013 or 14.
They're doomed to fail.
I was like, this is not smart. Here I am, this newly minted author walking around I know everything, right? And boy, did they nail a home run with that? And I've seen brands do this, and I think the winning ticket for someone like Rocktown is to really focus on who you are. Like Leopold Brothers, they focused on who they are, and they created a fan base immediately in Colorado, and it grew out. Arkansas has a fan base ready to be activated, and I know that Phil is tapping into that. I'm glad he asked that question because I want him to believe in himself, and I want him to know that what he is doing is getting those awards and winning critics for a reason, and just follow that.
Yeah.
Follow that.
I would take a page out of the beer world too. It's like, you know, you have all these craft breweries in small, in individual towns, and they all have their style and their town, and that's their market, their niche. You know, they don't have to be Sam Adams or Coors or all the Blue Moons or whatever. Just like we think, I think American whiskey as a whole category is it's not Kentucky bourbon that's going to be growing. And so if you're like the best Arkansas distiller and you're known as that, you can take that places, way further than just being another source brand out there.
I'm glad you both brought that up, because I feel that you're both correct. And first, Ryan, you had mentioned before, like, you have to figure out what your goal is. Is your goal scale? Like, if your goal is scale, you're really between a rock and a hard place right there, only because to be able to invest into the business, to be able to do all that, yes, you're getting on a waiting list for years to be able to get a new still from Vendome or whomever it is, versus talking to somebody else and like, okay, well, I can get Kentucky source product on the market here in the next 2 to 3 years, and I can just start getting money in the door. However, I really liked Fred's answer, and this is kind of what I look at as well, that you're going to start diminishing the value of your brand. So if you've owned your backyard and you've said, I've created a staple product, I'm already selling. If he says he's already selling out of it, why change the recipe? Like, why change what's working? Like, continue doing that and then figure out how to scale. So I would say start slowly figuring out, am I at 100% of my still time already? Can I add more fermenters? Do I add a second, a third shift to be able to crank this thing going as much as I possibly can to crank out, basically to max this out at 90 to 100% of utilization? And then from there, I'll figure out, well, then what do I do? Now I have to start reinvesting back into it. Do I do a second distillery? Do I add a second still? And I love your point too,
somebody
Ryan.
I can contract a still in the state for that also might be interested to help fund this too.
With that too. But the other thing you said, kind of like owning your backyard, you look at Texas. Texas is like one of those great markets where there's a few different distilleries that they really own, and people are proud about Texas whiskey, and they go and they drink it, and they have allegiance to what they are drinking, or what they're drinking, and that particular product. And so I feel that we're all kind of right in the fact that you need to kind of just put your stake in the ground and say, I want to make the best whiskey in my home state, and people will gravitate towards it because people are proud about where they're from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look at our relationship with Finger Lakes, because they're, in a very small community, but they are who they are, and they're not changing that, and they're not sourcing. They're just they are, and people love that, and I would say take a playbook from, Finger Lakes and look at what they've been doing and what their plans are to continue to do. So,
and if you'd asked me to put together a list of like 25 most successful craft whiskey distillers, I mean, Rocktown would have been on my list. And the one thing that is shifting a little bit is the market is demanding a lot more blends. You all are certainly a part of that conversation. So if you're wanting to create like a new limited edition offering or something, a little different to add some product offerings in your portfolio, maybe you do a Kentucky Arkansas blend of straights. I mean, there could be something there, but I don't think you go back to the drawing board and you start over, because what you've been doing has been working. I know it's been slow. I know you've been doing this since I think Phil founded Rocktown in 2009, 2010, somewhere around there. And I know it's not an overnight success. These things never are.
I mean, you're right also that I really like your idea too, because there was something, I think it came out last year at some point, where a few different craft distilleries all came together and they donated a barrel or two, and they came out with this bespoke blend, and they used that. I think they were doing that more for a charitable aspect, but I think that's something that is certainly untapped in the market, where craft distilleries have an opportunity to work together more than what you've seen any in the big boy industry, because they don't. Everybody's kind of frenemies at the end of the day, right? They're all friends, but they're all competing against each other. Versus in the craft distiller market, if you're in Arkansas, you're not competing with people maybe in California or Idaho or New York or whatever it is. So there's an opportunity to be able to sit there and do collaboration on a different level, where you all can kind of like bring those in and kind of promote each other's brands at the same exact time in different markets.
Yep. I like it.
Yeah, I mean,
his name was Phil. That's where I got Philadelphia from. I don't know what.
You know what? That makes sense.
Yeah.
It does, especially given that none of us got sleep last night.
I know.
So.
No, I think that was a really good question, and kind of figuring out exactly what do you do, what's sort of that next phase. Because
starting with like an A-lister too in the craft community, this is
I know
a good one.
But that's a great question. Appreciate it, Phil. So let's kind of go on to the next one. So this one comes from Jason Miller. He says it's probably a very complex question, but he says, I'm looking at blending and creating a business based on blending. What are some of the beginning steps in this process and any resources to look into before I start throwing down large sums of money down the drain?
Well, I guess in the process of acquiring the juice or acquiring how to learn how to blend or
everything.
Everything.
I think let's just take it from an everything standpoint.
Well, obviously, he's probably not a distiller so you're going to have to start making calls to find out what's available for you to start blending with. What do you want to be? Do you want to do something like, oh, I love craft whiskeys. I think it'd be fun to blend those together. Or I really love Kentucky bourbons, or I love Indiana bourbons or ryes or this or that. You need to really figure out which direction you're going to go. And then from there, you're going to have to pick up the phone, make calls and say, hey, I want to try your products. Let me walk through your mash bills, this and that. What do you have available? It's ready to bottle now. What do you have?
Yeah,
that's ready.
That's the first. That's really the first conversation to have is what can I get my hands on,
right?
Before you even figure out how to start blending.
Yeah, and so that's kind of you have to narrow that down to like, okay, what's going to be my unique offering? Do I think I'm the best at blending the different MGP mash bills? Do I think I'm the best at some of the Source Kentucky, or do I want to go out on a limb and try blending from different distilleries from different states? And then that's going to be your biggest hurdle because right now that's the toughest part. We're all, even us. We've been in this for 3 to 4 years and we're having a hard time acquiring aged product but we've kind of confined ourselves because we defined what products we want to work with and what audience and we're trying to serve. And so that's where I would begin my journey in that. And then in the blending regard is this, you just got to start just start taking different products that you have on currently and, like a weeded mash bill, a high rye mash bill, high rye, low rye, and what do you like and what are the flavors that you're picking up out of each of ones? And then like from there, I kind of just learned what I thought would be a good base product to work off of that hits a lot of checkpoints for me. It's not overly flavored in one way or the other, but it's just consistent. And then from there, I would add in, different components and see how they reacted to that base product. And then it's just a process of tweaking and trying and blending and just failing and, figuring it out. You just got to start. You're not, if you just sit around and wait for the perfect moment or somebody to teach you, it's not going to happen. You just got to just start working with what you have and learning the flavors and how they work together is what I would recommend.
So Ryan approached some basic principles, a very important one thing being finding your base. That's something Seagram's taught. And like it continues to be like the main blending strategies. You always have to have something that's a base, and then everything else are kind of like flavor additives. But I would say like, look, if you are new to this, you got to get experience. And there's people are always wanting to get into the distilling business, and there's people all over the country that have companies now. Even if you just work part time, I would say get your butt in a distillery and start working and helping out with operations, because smelling the place, being around it, it's always going to help you. So if you are wanting to start a restaurant and you have no restaurant experience, you are likely to fail. If you have an idea for a book, I get asked when people find out I'm an author, they always tell me they have an idea for a book. And I'm like, okay, write me 25,000 words and let's see how that goes, and I can help you from there. And people are like, well, that's a lot of work. I'm like, yes, writing a book is a lot of work. So if you can't just like start a company and like not have any experience with that company, unless you're really well off, and then you can bring the right people in. But like to anyone who wants to be a blender or a distiller or start something, you've got to get in there somehow, some way to start learning. This is a great first step. But what Ryan talked about just on the basic philosophy, the only thing I could add to that is go to a liquor store find the best available cheap product, and then have that be your base. Like for me at home, it's my base when I'm doing my home blending is Four Roses Yellow Label. And then
which is a blend of already stuff, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You're 10, you're starting off with 10 recipes.
And then from there, just add a bunch of stuff, but you figure it out. But like if you just go to a liquor store and play around, but just know that when you start your company, you're not going to get stuff that's that good.
No,
and I kind of was generalizing a lot of things.
But you did a great job generalizing.
Yeah, it definitely takes a lot of time and a lot of practice. I mean, Kenny and I have done over 400, maybe 500 barrel picks, and just going through all that process and tasting and learning what flavors I like or what barrels do to the whiskey at certain ages or this part of the where or this and that. It's like it's taking a long time. Like it's not just like I woke up and I'm like master blender. Well, and I'm not even a master blender by any means, but
apprentice blender.
What's something in the blending process from stage 1 to bottle that you did not anticipate?
Gosh, yeah. So what I did not anticipate is like you're like, okay, say I have a my base product and I just want to add like a fruity component or a spicy component or a smoky component or this or that, and you're like, well, maybe 20% is what I want to do, and you're like, 20% just makes it like go way south, and then you're like, well, maybe it's 2%, and you're like, I can't taste any of that, and then it's like, well, maybe it's 10%, and then you're like, well, that tastes like shit, and then but then you go like start reducing it down or adding up, and you're like, and it's amazing how much like 1 milliliter or 2 milliliters of this or that will like completely change the structure of the product. Yeah. It's that's what I didn't anticipate. I thought it would just be like, okay, I really like caramel, vanilla, sugar, sweet, brown sugar. I like that as my base, and then I want something to be 30% fruity and 20% spicy. So I'm going to do 50% this, 30% that, 20%, and it's going to work out, and it never works out that way.
Yeah, and it's also trying to figure out when you're doing this, it doesn't mean that the most mature product has to be your base either. Like that's...
No, you got to go with, that's a great point. You also have to like look at the cost of goods sold and like, what am I working with and what's this price point going to be? And so a lot of times your base has to be a younger product that's where the cost makes sense to where you get your cost down. You can't just have a 12-year sourced Kentucky bourbon be your base because it's going to be so expensive.
The easiest blend ever.
Right, exactly. So it's the nice thing is you pick out and you kind of define your constraints, and that makes it easier to work when you have constraints because there's so much nuances and different ways you can go. So you kind of have to really narrow your focus and find the flavors that you're really trying to work with and the products you're working with. So it kind of eliminates all that. Because we were talking to Brent Elliott yesterday, and he's like talking about the limited edition, blending that, and he's like, God, you could just never make a decision. You could just tweak it this way or tweak it that way, this way, and it can always be better. It can always be worse, and it's just like putting constraints kind of helps you like work within those limits and create a good product at the end.
Yeah, from a business perspective, you brought this up. Stephen Thompson, may he rest in peace, from Kentucky Artisan Distillery, formerly president of Brown-Forman, always said that when he's creating a new product, he thinks about where it's going to be on the shelf first and that price point there. Does he want it to be between Makers and Woodford Reserve or somewhere else? And he will create a price point in his head, and they will blend accordingly to get to that price point. So we don't know where Jason is on his journey, but like if he's already been in the business for a little bit, I think everything that you said business-wise is what to focus on. If he's new, I would say do everything you can to get experience, and who knows, maybe you all need a helper for the next time you all are blending a batch, and Jason can come help out.
Maybe
be a fly on the wall. Just watch.
It is interesting,
and that's what I've done. I just ask people, can I just watch you and see what you do? What's your process? And
does that ever get weird? You're like, can I watch you? Or?
Well, typically we don't just watch, we talk.
Yeah. Well, but that's what we've done over the years. We have found ways to get ourselves involved in this industry one way or another.
So the other thing is I also look at this from a very analytical perspective. And Ryan, you brought up the idea of constraints, and that is sort of really the place where you have to start from. You've got to make those initial phone calls and you've got to talk to brokers. Oddly enough, as much as you want to try to go and say, I want to go down the new make path and start all this and talking to the distilleries directly, we were in a very advantageous position to be able to do some stuff like that because we had created these relationships before, but 90% of people don't get to do that. That is something that we just got put in a really good position to be able to do that because of the podcast and who we've interviewed. And the other thing that we did in regards of our brand of actually bringing them along with us and actually helping promote their brands. And they kind of saw the value in that. But if you're starting this journey, odds are you're either going to be talking to a broker or you're talking directly to MGP. And that is going to be your gateway to figure out, okay, this is what is available to me. This is what my cost is going to be. And as soon as you start seeing the prices of those barrels and you think, okay, well, I can get a 2-year product for, $2,000. Is that really what I want to bet the farm on and bet my blend on? Or do I need to spend 3.5 to get this 4 or 5 or 6 year product? And then from there, you just keep going down this path to figure out, all right, well, now I know what my potential cost is going to be from a wholesale point. But nobody really starts figuring out, all right, well, what's that mean to actually get it onto the shelf? And that's where you have to start doing the spreadsheet math of everybody's got to take their cut in between. So you've got to get the 25 to 30% for the wholesaler, the other 25 to 35% for the retailer. And so the one thing that I think that people might be missing here is that sometimes you end up making the least amount of money in this whole chain of processes. But back to the start of sorting and blending thing is that, yeah, you have to start with those constraints. You figure out exactly what are the barrels that I'm going to be able to create and what is available to me. If you figure out that the only thing available is 4 to 5 year Indiana bourbon, okay, well, how are you going to make yourself different? What's going to be your angle that makes you want to stand on the shelf that you've got to go and you've got to talk to distributors in all these different states? And nobody's just wanting to pick up the phone and say, yeah, sure, we'd love to sell your product. Like, you have to convince distributors to sell your product sometimes. You've got to have a story. You've got to have something that's different or unique. You're just not yet another MGP bourbon on the market. You've got to figure out, what is my angle? What's going to make this different? So that's just more from the business side of things, is that you've got to figure out what is going to be unique about my blend that's going to make it different than the other MGP bourbons or whatever else. That I think the other thing that's get lost in this as well, we talk about MGP a lot, but here, just fast forward.
Ross and Squibb.
Yeah.
Ross and all the Squibbies.
Love squid.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in 2 to 3 years, there's going to be a good chunk of Kentucky bourbon on the market, because
Sure.
this is right now we're getting into the point where there's investor barrels. People put down a lot of stuff in new make, and they're not going to go to market with it. They're going, or should I say, into the bottling market. They're going to get it on the open market, and they're going to try to flip it and get a good amount of money on it. So there will be Kentucky bourbon on the market soon. You just got to figure out, is that what you want to bet it on? And we can tell you all kind of stories of the source market where you get kind of some horror kind of aspects of it as well, but we won't go down that.
Yeah, you just got to, that Malcolm Gladwell rule, the 10,000 hour rule, I find it to ring true in every endeavor that I've been a part of. It's like, it takes 10,000 hours to like become knowledgeable and good at something, and people just want to jump in and they want overnight successes. It just doesn't work that way. And when I'm still young and dumb, but I was even younger and dumber, 10 years
when we
ago.
started this, maybe.
When we started this, and it's like, you want that traction, and you want these things to happen as fast as possible. But if the things that were happening to us now happened to me when we first started, I wouldn't have been mature enough or, responsible enough or been able to capitalize on the opportunities that were given to us, just because I didn't have that experience. And so now, through the hard work and through the sweat and all, we're able to kind of make the best of what we've created. But it didn't happen overnight. It's just, you got to start somewhere and don't expect success. Always be humble and just keep learning and trying and growing, and then eventually it'll happen for you.
So one of the questions from Jason here as well is kind of like, what are the resources to look into? So if you were to say, if I wanted to start a blending business, what resources would you start looking at? If you're anything like me, then you can't get enough about bourbon. And that's why I'm a subscriber to Bourbon Plus magazine. Bourbon Plus is a quarterly publication that tells the stories from the heart of bourbon, the farmers who grow the grain, the distillers who labor over the process, and the people like you and me who raise their glasses to celebrate it all. Subscribe to Bourbon Plus magazine today at bourbonplus.com, that's PLUS.com, and use code PURSUIT at checkout for $5 off your subscription. Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. Shopify's point of sale is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. And with Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers in-line and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns, from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. And get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone. Transform your tablet into a point-of-sale system, or use Shopify's point-of-sale Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning 24/7 help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/bourbon, all lowercase, and go to shopify.com/bourbon to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/bourbon. So one of the questions from Jason here as well is kind of like, what are the resources to look into? So if you were to say, if I wanted to start a blending business, what resources would you start looking at?
A blending business.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. He wants to create a business based on the blend, right?
Like,
so what are the resources that you do? I mean, is it just like straight up, just you've got to go and have?
Does he want to be a contract blender for someone?
No. I mean, he just wants to create a business that's based on blending. And I mean, maybe it's his own product, but is it just say like, hey, start off with 150,000 and figure out where that takes you, or is it
well,
20,000?
Or you could go, there's Moonshine University. It has great, classes. Like, they're not cheap, but they're not overly expensive. And so if you want to start with the $1,000 class, you can do it. Moonshiners, they have a blending class. I've looked into it. For me, we've been fortunate enough that the Rolodex of blenders we've worked with I feel like that's better to go learn from them. But, somebody that doesn't have those connections, Moonshiners U would probably be great. There's actually a ton of stuff online about Japanese blending that I learned from and Scotch blending, because that's like a big, that's what they do over there. There's only Japan, There's only 5 or 6. It's similar to here, but really over there, there's 5 or 6 major producers and then a lot of blenders. And I would go on, I just go on YouTube or Google, listen to people that blend Japanese and Scotch whiskey, kind of get their philosophies and whatnot. There's so much on the internet that's free that you can start with there, or you can go to somewhere paid like Moonshiners, and then that's just kind of what I would recommend.
Yeah, and let's be very candid. Blending is, up until recently, blending was a dirty word in American whiskey.
It still is.
And it still is largely, and that dates back to like the Canadian blenders coming in, devaluing whiskey on the shelf, and then like rot gut blends post-prohibition being the only thing that people could buy, and so blend has a negative connotation in American whiskey, and so blending as a profession in the American whiskey circles is kind of new age. While they had always been in that position, they didn't necessarily call them master blenders, but the true great blenders in spirits are in Jamaica, Barbados, Canada, Scotland, Ireland, Japan. So if you really want to come to this and be unique, spend some time in Barbados with Foursquare and learn about blending pot and column, or go to Jamaica and spend some time at Hampton, somewhere like that. Like, you want to really get into the esterification of what can happen in a blend that's different, and you could bring something different to the table, going back to like, hey, how is this different? I mean, you could create an entire business model by only blending column distilled stuff with pot distilled stuff. So blending only pot and column as the two final distillates of those things, and then figuring out ways to make it unique every single time. So that's just that's a resource I got for you.
And I got one more thought that just popped in my head. Another easy way to kind of start playing around with this is, and it's much harder today, 3-4 years ago, I would go get, individual barrels, selections of Four Roses single barrels, because you're only having the individual recipes.
Oh, yeah.
And you could start playing with those and figuring out, which I'm going to create my base. This one's more fruity. This one's more the spicy. This one's more, got the rye spice. This one's more oaky, and that was a fun, easy way to kind of like get the motion going of understanding the different recipes and how they work with each other. But obviously it's much harder now to go get that was when Four Roses single barrels set on shelves and you could go pick out each different one.
Yeah. Plus you don't get the luxury of blending 8 to 12-year-old barrels usually on the market. So.
Or you can, just like say like I'm trying to think of a 5-year single barrel that's picks that are relevant. Like, is it Ezra Brooks? Yeah. Ezra Brooks or Rebel Yells or the Remus ones, stuff that's new riff, they're available. They're single barrels, but they're going to be different, and like get 5 or 6 of them and get different flavor profiles and start, navigating your way through those and blending them together to see how they all kind of work together. That's another easy way to go about it.
Because you have an opportunity to be able to try these but some of these could potentially already be on the open market, right? There's been Heaven Hill barrels on the open market. Of course, if you want to go get some foolproof from Barton, you can kind of start playing from there. Then, of course, you're going to have some stuff from another place in Danville, probably in a relatively the next few years too. That you'll be able to
go get some Wilderness Trail single barrels and see how they work together and whatnot.
There's no secret there that there's definitely some investor barrels that'll be on the market there coming from their source product as well. So
I feel like we're gonna have to do a 2 episode. We've only got through 2 questions.
No. I think that's we got time for another here. So ready to move on?
Yep.
All right. So this is coming from Donna from Barrel Proof Marketing, but he hasn't checked it out. She's got a great Instagram page where it's literally talking nothing but marketing and bourbon. And so it's fascinating to kind of see. But she wants to get some advice on social media. So what advice would you give to a new brand on how to build a social media following?
Oh, God, I have nothing. I mean,
we can all just take from our own perspectives and history on how this worked as well.
But I'm not a brand, like I think
you technically are a brand. Fred Minnick is a brand.
But the reason Fred Minnick is a brand is because you are you, whether people like it or not. Most people like it, and but you are you, and I think is authentic. You got to have to be a brand. You have to have a story that's real, something that people connect to, and then you just have to be you. You don't need to flash it up. Like you just authenticity.
Authenticity.
Yeah.
Authenticity.
Authenticity.
It's sort of repeating what you were saying.
It's what people connect to. I mean, there's tons of like when people post in bottles that are filtered and this or that, and it's like it's nonsense. I just scroll on by, But like Aaron from Smoke Wagon,
exactly
I'm
where
just
I was gonna go.
I'm like, he's there in his ladle with his mustache and belt buckle, and it's entertaining. And I'm like, he's just him
and
being him.
35 rings on, with a big hat.
He's cruising around Vegas, the mountains.
And I think that's I
don't think he just made that up. I think that's who he is.
Whiskey has always been a big personality world, and when you see advertisements where it's trying to, break away from the personality and reach a target audience that it's not capturing, and they transfer that over into their social media, I think that fails. The best brand I've ever seen, period, of marketing is Maker's Mark. Maker's Mark is if there was social media in 1975, they would have killed it, but they didn't. They had billboards, and they owned every single billboard that mattered everywhere, and it worked. And so, I think, before you do social media, your brand has to have an identity. We're talking personality in some ways. And I appreciate that a lot of brands are held true to their trademarks and things that they feel like they got to repeat and say over and over again. But people on social media don't give 2 shits about your slogan. Your personality and your brand identity has got to fit naturally within the fine kinds of social media. And what Aaron from Smoke Wagon has done, what Makers has been able to do over the years, trying to think of someone else that's
you got to understand this you're looking at 2 huge opposite sides of the spectrum there, because Aaron is on his own with zero marketing budget on Instagram because it's $0 to get started, versus Maker's Mark, which employs their back end advertising agency that they've had around forever.
You had the Samuels family, really out there promoting it and pushing it along. Otherwise I'm not sure that it would be where it was without them.
Those are two very different strategies. You have one strategy is an individual driven, getting people to become fans of that individual. And then you have another grouping that is like they have lineage and they've been doing this for so long and they just fit very nicely here. Another great example is Bardstown Bourbon Company. They created competitions, they created sweepstakes, they did things, collaborations that they tapped into other followers. So I mean, that's always a strategy that really works. What is very dangerous is when you see brands do giveaways, and we have private messages about this all the time when we see a brand doing a giveaway. Like, that's against Instagram's rules. That's against actually federal code. And if someone gets the giveaway in California, you can get a class action lawsuit against you. Lots of things cause cancer in California, but not other parts of the world. So you got to be careful if you're doing a sweepstakes and things like that. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways to get there with social media.
And there's this new way of you look at somebody like Blue Run who has no personality behind it. It just is about a butterfly on packaging and like a status symbol. It's like more of like a shoe brand than it is a bourbon brand. I mean, the bourbon's great and the packaging's great. It's interesting
how they were able to kind of maneuver.
How they were, and it's very smart though, because the new bourbon consumer loves, highlighting, showing off their bottles, showing the beautiful packaging and whatnot. And Blue Run's been able to extract that, from that data from, what's going on in the consumer's mindset now. And they've kind of built their brand on not just a personality, but almost a lifestyle, persona kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to look at here is that we have to kind of put our guardrails back on and says, if I'm a new brand, not an established brand, but I'm a new brand, how do I do this? I think there's two ways to look at it. And one, it's how much money do you have? Because that's really going to dictate how much you can put into marketing. And when I say marketing, that's everything from PR campaigns, actually hiring a PR person, photography. I mean, you name it. Everything that makes it look pretty on the outside is one aspect of it. If you're dirt broke, then really social media is the only way you get to go, and you've just got to have the authentic personality, or you've got to have a newer iPhone that can use portrait mode, right? I mean, there's really...
and really, to that point, photography, that's one of my backgrounds in bourbon and sunlight are amazing together. So if you're a new brand, you don't have to do a lot. You don't have to hire a photographer. An iPhone will get the job done. In fact, the iPhone and Instagram is why I basically gave up photography, is because you just couldn't compete. I knew the technology was changing to where it would be difficult to get gigs at a competitive level. And you get a Glencairn or any glass with the sunset wherever you are. I mean, that's a guaranteed beautiful shot.
And you could work with other people like Whiskey with a View on Instagram. It's not like crazy professional, actually crazy good professional photography, but it's the bar of what you're going to cost is probably not going to be so astronomical that you're going to be like, oh my God, I could. And you're going to get a great photo at the end of the day, and you get to collaborate with somebody in the whiskey community as well.
I think it just comes down to you have to believe in what you're doing.
Believe.
And humans we're all connected to stories, and we're storytellers. We love stories. And we love stories that we can identify and that we believe in. And so as a brand, you have to what is my story? And I have to believe in it. And I have to relay that message to the world. And and try to build those connections to get people to believe in what I believe. And so I don't know.
No, it's true. And there's the other part of it of a picture is just one thing, but how do you convey it in text form too? Because if you're one of those brands and it's all it is a picture of, your hand around a rocks glass with the bourbon and it says cheers to the weekend. I'm like, okay, what's there's nothing there that feels engaging to that versus, one thing that I think it's very hard to do is you've got to make sure the personality of whatever's kind of coming behind it. So even on our side, when we're doing Pursuit Spirits on our Instagram handles, granted, it's not me or Ryan sitting there all the time as being a face of it, but there's going to be some photos, yet the text is going to come through that is going to be more like our personality.
Yeah.
Maybe a little snarky, maybe a little, kind of it's something that kind of has that personality show through. So you got to have
because we're whiskey geeks. It conveys like stuff that's in our world. It's stuff that we're a part of, and everything we could deal with on a day-to-day basis. That's in our story. That's in our marketing because that's who we are, and that's what we try to convey.
Yeah, I mean, I find that social media doesn't work if you try too hard. That's my philosophy with it. I mean, I put stuff up, but I don't plan on it or anything like that. It's just like, oh, here's a bottle, picture, it's up. That's it.
That is true. You make a good point there when it comes to social media strategy. We've actually talked to different brands before, and they have asked us like, oh, you've been so successful on Bourbon Pursuit on Instagram and everything like that. How do you plan out your posts? I go, we don't. There's no plans. But which is different because we're not a bourbon brand. I think you do have to have a little bit of a social media strategy centered around it, and that could be things like activations with bars or restaurants that you're working with, new products that you're coming out with.
Connect with like bourbon groups, and that's fundamental level. Is just there's a lot of new whiskey groups just popping up, and they're trying to get in this in this space and make the name for it. If you're a new brand, it's what a perfect opportunity. New Riff did that better than anyone. Was that as the big boys were trying to narrow down single barrels, they were like, nope, come on, whiskey community, we're going to offer you as many single barrels as we want. And look how fast that shot their trajectory up as a brand. So look out for those whiskey community brands that you can reach out to. And
Nashville Barrel's doing it right now.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's one of the ways that you kind of work your way from the inside out, because what happens is that whiskey geeks find it first, they latch onto it, then it starts getting popular, then they go and try to find the next thing. Yep. And so you're going to be able to sort of ride the coattails for a little bit if you can find those communities and work with them too. I mean, that's just not just for barrel picks, but that is on social media. I mean, you can do things of having AMAs with other kind of I hate using the word influencers, but I mean it truly is like you've got to find the people that are in the right social media channels and say, hey, let's hop on. I'll send you some samples. Let's kind of talk through some product and see if your audience is interested to learn more about it, and kind of just build a relationship from there too.
And I would say don't try to look for where other people are not. There's not a brand that's active on Twitch. Like
that's very true.
What's Twitch?
It's actually a streaming platform mostly made for gamers.
But it's like you connect with that fan base there,
and it's huge, by the way. Like
enormous.
Billions and billions of people and dollars that are thrown into it.
And so, there's a lot of opportunities to take up real estate where other brands are not. I don't think anybody does Twitter well in the bourbon brand community. It's just kind of like, here's our new product. But Twitter can. If you look at Wendy's Twitter, Wendy's Twitter is like,
I love it when those brands have those battles.
It's great, and they should
each other,
and they should be like trolling us, So the brand should be trolling, people in the Twitter community just to have some fun. It's not mean or anything.
Yeah. And
the last piece of advice I will give you: do not ever, under any circumstances, buy followers. Right. Because your engagement will be obvious, and there's a lot of ways that we can find out if you bought followers.
Yeah, it's almost like it sticks out like a sore thumb, and you'll have some likes for a day, and it makes you look good from a PR perspective. And gosh, I'm not going to name names, but there's some other brands that were like, oh, like the most followed whiskey brands on Instagram and stuff, and you look at it and I start analyzing it, and you're like, wait a minute, this nothing adds up here.
150,000 followers, yet only 12 likes on their last photo.
Yeah. It's like, look for, like you said, go where people are not. It's like, look for other ways, like other, say influencers that are not, say, in the whiskey space, but they, might have their like a tentacle or something that might touch the whiskey space, and where I can't tell many
golfers,
I can't tell many products that I'm now a huge fan of that I just heard it on this podcast or I saw it on an influencer on that was totally not even related to it, that I just, because I trusted that individual, I went and purchased that product.
It's amazing. I'm the same way. I mean, I have a particular brand of something that I buy. I've probably spent It's something we all use every day, and like I just I have to have it. You know, it's the only thing that fits me, so it works.
Yep.
The last thing I want to do is touch on the channels aspect. Like, where should you be? The easiest thing to say is everywhere, but that's impossible to kind of keep up with. So you look at Instagram as probably one of the obvious because there's a big community there already. Facebook, sure, because that's where an older demographic is. They can go and like it. They can see sort of what the
and that's where those
true.
groups are.
It's where the groups are, but mostly the groups are they're not really sharing stuff that happens from a whiskey page into the community necessarily. It's more or less, you have to be able to find the older demographic and find, just kind of keep touch with those. Twitter is a little bit untapped, but Twitter is also kind of maybe one of those channels that isn't as popular anymore.
It's very popular.
Well, it's popular. It's just hard for bourbon brand because it's not like
it's not promotional.
And it's not like political or controversial topic. People like to just get in there and like rant, and so it's hard for a brand to be like in amongst all the noise in there to get seen.
You brought up a great one with Twitch. There's an opportunity there to be able to capture that audience.
I think someone could come out as like a streamer, as a brand, and crush it. Like Buffalo Trace has done a lot of streams.
Their Whiskey Wednesdays,
and they've done very well with that. You've seen their social media grow, and obviously established brand.
Yeah, they already had 1.3 million followers on Facebook already, so that was an easy one to start.
But you know how many social media sites of brands that I actually would tune into for that? I mean, like I don't know who's doing anything. Because I don't care. I just live in my own little. We all live in our own little world. And brands are always like doing brand stuff, and that's not of interest to me. But when Buffalo Trace does their live streams, it's not brand oriented. It's that individual that's behind the screen, and that's why like Aaron is so fascinating. It's because it's about him and the story. And I think Twitch, any kind of streaming, you can really build some super fans there.
Yeah, I mean, there's already an established YouTube audience as well, so. That's one aspect to go look. I mean, there's streaming that happens
for now. There's always discussion of it's all going to go away.
Yeah,
but it's there right now.
One platform we didn't bring up, which is probably a completely different demographic, it's going to be a lot younger, is Snapchat. Nobody's doing Snapchat yet, so that's also something that people could potentially look at.
Actually, they had like some there was some like industry data of like basically encouraging people to stay away from Snapchat because it was so young.
Hey, that means that there's an opportunity there because nobody else is on it. So if you're a first mover and you can make some people it doesn't have to be a public thing. Like it can be something that just says, hey, follow us on Snapchat. And you could just be people that it's the same thing as following you on Facebook. Like they basically subscribe and get your sort of RSS feed of stuff.
What about Foursquare? Is that still around?
I don't think anybody's checking in places anymore.
Is MySpace still around?
Yeah, but last thing to even touch on, of course, is the obvious of TikTok. We've talked to a few brands already. Nobody's really moving there yet. Rabbit Hole did some stuff at the very beginning. I don't know if they're still doing it.
But it was a private channel.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's definitely the demographic there is starting to skew a long way away from it was just teenagers dancing. And plus the way the algorithm works, it's going to figure out whether you like drinking, do you like bread making, do you like plants, like all this other kind of stuff. And it's going to tailor the algorithm for you. And there's already a huge bourbon community on TikTok. So again, another opportunity.
You are the bourbon community of TikTok. Come on now.
I
bourbon
try.
TikTok over here.
I started the downfall of it. But the other thing is, we go back to Instagram and how they're trying to compete with TikTok is you got to look at Reels because Reels are the opportunity that you can go ahead and create those videos and it's going to get native engagement. It's not paid promotion or anything like that. A lot of Reels, since it's one of those things that you look and say there's not enough content. So what they're going to do is they're going to promote anything that's there. And so those are the particular videos that are going to get promoted really quickly. So it's an easy way for your brand to get recognized. Lastly, I'll put one more out there that I don't think anybody's doing as well is everybody might have a LinkedIn page when they just talk about their company, but nobody's talking about their product. And LinkedIn is it's completely different than what it was in 2011 and 2013 when we just were fishing for our CVs. Yeah. It's a completely different arena now.
Yeah,
LinkedIn's powerful right now.
Yeah, being a business owner, I've never gone in that space because I'm like, I don't need a resume or I don't need people coming to look for me at jobs. So I guess I have to revisit that.
It's the new Facebook right now.
Speaking of LinkedIn, Fawn Weaver of Uncle Nearest is in there and their commercial.
So
there you go.
I mean, There's a whiskey connection there.
Well, thank you everybody for all the questions. You brought some.
Are we done?
We are done for
I
this.
thought we
one.
had like 5 more or something.
Oh, we do, but we can save that for another
We're
episode.
going to do
Break
part
it
2.
We
Part
can save it
Right.
for our part
We're
two.
in that new, I forgot, we're in that new world of we have to hit it right at a particular time. So I'll shut up now.
Yep. People aren't happy.
Yeah, but definitely thank you all for doing that. If you have other questions, you can actually go and there's the form. The link is there, and we could use it for a later episode. It's brbn.at/consult. So bourbon.at/consult, and we can kind of take your questions at a later date. But with that, cheers, everybody. See you next week.